All. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So, as promised, this is the start of the series of talks where I'll be presenting the court hearing of Apter versus FDA, and I think there'll be 3 or 4 parts of it. So, because I had promised it, I'm going to do this. So, today's talk, there are 3 things to notice as I read the transcription of the talks of the hearing. Number one, was these some serious statements from FDA or not? They said we were just joking, these were just quips. Number two, at one point, FDA claimed that we have science behind our views. And when judges asked that what is that science in the case of ivermectin, you would see that how FDA didn't really have a very good answer. And the answer that they have for the purist amongst us, even like me, who thinks that the evidence should be randomized controlled trials in most cases, and I don't feel that anecdotes are as high in evidence as RCTs would be. And the same purists have been saying and kind of bad mouthing or discounting or discarding other studies that may be smaller. Here you would see that how FDA is asked for science and they presented an anecdote of reports for hospitalizations, which is not an RCT, which is reports. These are anecdotes. And the third part of the transcript that I wanted to cover today is that did FDA have the authority to regulate off-label? And so these are the 3 points that I want to discuss today. Then we'll continue next week with the remaining parts. The whole video is about 49 minutes. I'll cover a total of 30 minutes with some very interesting points. Today, a smaller part. So welcome. And John says just horsing around. So stop it. That's what was the message. So this is the fifth. So U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. And this link to this video is in the description of this video, the one that you're watching. And so you can watch this video. I'm hoping some of you have. But I wanted to go over the transcript because the audio quality wasn't that great. So any intonations or emphasis are mine. I can't reproduce exactly how they were speaking. For that, you'll have to listen to them. Any editorialization will be mine as well, and I'll say it when I do that. So here is where I thought it will be interesting, where the FDA starts presenting their part of the story or arguments. So that is time 1735. Speaker, FDA. Narration, may it please the court, Ashley Honnold for the United States. So that was her introduction that, hey, I'm here. This case is about informational statements made by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to inform consumers about the dangers of using certain drugs. FDA made these statements in response to multiple reports of consumers being hospitalized after self-medicating with ivermectin intended for horses, which is available for purchase over the counter without the need for a prescription. So that was their position. That, hey, we were talking about the horse ivermectin, and we had anecdotes, we had reports of people hospitalized. So if you want to call it science, that is totally your prerogative. You can. This is not science. Somebody could be hospitalized for some other thing and still be saying that this was ivermectin. This is why appropriate scientific studies are needed for anything, including ivermectin. So this is how she started. Then she continued at 1810. FDA did not purport to require anyone to do anything or to prohibit anyone from doing. And she reached this far when the judge had the next question. So again, catch the gist of it, that they are simply trying to say, they'll take many positions throughout the argument hearing, but their original starting position is, we heard some reports and we then started joking about it. This is my editorialization, this is my impression, as you would see. So judge said, what about when it said, no, stop it? Why isn't that a command? That seems to me, so this is judge saying, not Mubin saying. I saw in the last video people commenting on me that why don't I understand this? Well, it is a case in the court to understand this. So I don't have to understand it for the court. They would do it. Court will figure out what was a command or not command, and what was the context of the command, and what was the level of the command or not. So judge says, what about when it said, no, stop it? Why isn't that a command? That seems to me, if we were in English class, they would say that was a command, stop it. That is different than we are providing helpful information. So judge is saying to FDA that, hey, you're saying that you're providing helpful information, because over here they said we are providing informational messages. So they said, stop it seems to be different. Even if you are in an English class, they would say it is a command. FDA says, Your Honor, that language that the FDA used in these tweets were merely quips. Your Honor, we were just joking. So far in the context, if you read it, they said, we heard some anecdotes of hospitalization that became our science, and we started joking. We made a joke. Used in these tweets were really quips. And I don't think that these quips change the substance of FDA statements as plaintiffs. And she could not complete the sentence. So this is the FDA's response to, was it a command? They said, these were quips. So the judge said, is that a command? Stop it. FDA said, the tweets about the horse ivermectin were intended to advise consumers that they should not use ivermectin intended for animals, and that this could be unsafe. So it seems reasonable that they are trying to give a statement, but there is a problem in here which judges are trying to figure out, and that is, are they allowed to do this with any authority? Can they do it, horse or not horse? And I know that I've talked about this in the last talk as well, but I wanted to make sure that this series with the transcript is complete. So this is the first part, kind of some part is repeating. So judge said at 1902, I'm sorry, can you answer the question, please? Is that a command? Stop it. FDA responded, Your Honor, in some contexts, those words could be construed as a command. In some contexts, this could be a command. But in this context, where FDA was simply using these words in the context of a quippy tweet meant to share its informational article, those statements do not rise to the level of a command. So their first response was, we said it because we had some anecdote. We wanted to stop from my horse ivermectin. When the judges said that, were you commanding? They said, no, we were joking. Quippy tweets. To share its informational article, those statements do not rise to the level of a command. So they're saying, no, these were not commands. We're not commanding. Plaintiff can see that it was proper for FDA to identify what ivermectin is FDA authorized for. It's FDA approved for certain conditions like skin conditions or parasites, and it is not FDA approved for treating COVID. So then judge says, what other drugs that does the FDA provide information on that says that it's not approved for other uses. So you have now seen the previous section, which is about quips, that, hey, we were making a joke. Now you would see the next section where they're going to talk about our views are science, or our views are based on science. So they're saying, this is my editorialization, this is my impression. I'm putting words in their mouth, so they may be saying something else, but this is my impression, that they're saying, when we say something, it is based on science. Like it is an inherent quality or property of their messaging that whatever they said is science or is based on science. So check this out, and you would see they said this and then they kind of relinquished this position because they actually didn't have a science. So see here, FDA said, what ivermectin is, the judge said, what other drugs does the FDA provide information on that says that it's not approved for other uses? FDA says, sure. It makes these kind of statements all the time, and I'm happy to give the court a few examples. Judge says, please do. FDA says, so, for example, FDA can warn the public that drugs like opioids are highly addictive and can be dangerous. Although there are FDA authorized uses for opioids, there are also dangerous uses. So now they're comparing ivermectin to opioid, or they're not saying similar things like opioid for other cases. In my opinion, they didn't even raise alarms for opioid for a very long time. But anyways, this is their first example. And FDA has to be able to tell the public in its scientific view. So now comes the scientific view. FDA has to be able to tell the public in its scientific view that some uses are dangerous. So my editorialization, that they are saying that when we say something, it is based on science. Now, like language, that usually it is said that for language grammar, when you speak with the native of a language, whatever way they are expressing, that is the grammar. So here they're saying, because we are the ones tasked with safety and efficacy and health, whatever we are saying, you should know that it is a scientific view. So judges are kind of curious about that how scientific is that? So FDA is saying, FDA has to be able to tell the public in its scientific view that some uses are dangerous. So judge says, does it have a scientific view? Has it been through any type of scientific testing or notice and comment or any sort of doctor review at the FDA that would be a basis for these comments? So the judge says, okay, I understand that you are saying you have a scientific view. What is the basis for your scientific view? Again, I'm putting my words in judge's mouth, so that is not, I do not know what is his intention or her intention to ask these, but this is my impression that they're saying, okay, you said scientific view. Did you do any science? And they gave some examples. They said, was there some scientific testing, or was there a notice and comment, or was there any sort of doctor reviewing these things and asking the FDA to say, here is my review and it is good or bad? FDA responded. Check this out. This is very interesting statements. Yes, Your Honor, the FDA does have a scientific view. It's charged by the Congress with ensuring that medical drugs are safe and effective, and FDA did conduct. So she stopped here. She said, FDA did conduct, I think, scientific analysis as to ivermectin. But, so she had reached this. This was very interesting. I heard it again and again to see that she had an inherent doubt in her own head because there was nothing which was the basis of her statement of scientific view. And now she was struggling to figure out how to respond it. So she said, yes, Your Honor, the FDA does have a scientific view. It's charged by Congress with ensuring that medical drugs are safe and effective. And FDA did conduct, I think, scientific analysis as to ivermectin. But, and judge said, what did it do about ivermectin that before issuing these types of informational warnings? So judge said, okay, so you have a scientific view and you did a scientific analysis. Please tell me what that is. And FDA said, Your Honor, I don't think there is anything in the record that specifically tracks FDA's processes. How bad of a statement is that? You are a government agency, you are doing something and you're not tracking it. So now that you're saying, hey, our views are scientific view, and you're asked, tell us what is your scientific view based on, what is the science? They say, well, we don't have any, I don't think there is anything in the record that specifically tracks FDA's processes. How bad is that? Just think about it. But for FDA to share information with the public that in its scientific view, there are dangers with using certain drugs as evidenced by multiple reports of consumers being hospitalized. So everyone who is trying to push their narrative to others during the pandemic, for sure, they just say, my view is scientific view. FDA is doing that as well. And now look at the basis. So she struggled through proving what is science or what science did they do. Finally, she arrives at this. Its scientific view, there are dangers with using certain drugs as evidenced by multiple reports of consumers being hospitalized. So this is important. They hear it. They should talk about it. Sure. They have some responsibility there to communicate. Fine. The question is, do they have the authority to regulate or command? So here, their science was multiple reports of hospitalization. This is not an RCT. This is not a randomized controlled trial. This is not a scientific view of a large scale. And those who are going to say, no, this was a sufficient anecdotes to be able to provide statements. There could be statements. Hey, we are hearing there is something going on. Compared to stop it, or why you shouldn't use ivermectin, or sending out letters to the whole world, which had a lot of repercussion, which FDA says, no, we didn't do anything. So it is interesting for me to see that the science was multiple reports. So I think reports leading to informational statements, really, truly informational statements, could be a useful thing. Hey, we are hearing this. Just like doctors can say, I saw a patient, I used this drug and it went very well. And then others can say, well, this is an anecdote, n equals 3. What does that mean? Nothing. And you have seen these kind of statements. So here that could have happened to FDA as well, that when they give these statements, then somebody could say, hey, what do you mean by hospitalization? How many? 2 people? And it equals to maybe not sufficient. But that doesn't become a scientific view. That just becomes our responsibility to alert the public, in my opinion. So again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm looking at it from a doctor's point of view. So then judge says, so here, of consumers being hospitalized after self-medicating with ivermectin intended for horses. This is FDA saying. Then judge says, so it's the third section starting. So before that, let's wrap up the scientific view part as well. So FDA, in my opinion, struggled through the idea of explaining what science they actually have. Now, next section starts. Judge says, at 2139 in the video, does the FDA have any authority, any legal authority to regulate off-label uses of prescription drugs, which is what this would be? What gives them that authority? FDA responded and said, Your Honor, FDA has multiple overlapping sources of authority that I'm happy to walk through that gives FDA authority to convey information to the public, but FDA was not regulating the off-label use of drugs. So my understanding that, yes, your question is great, Your Honor, but we actually never try to regulate. So why the question? If you would ask a question, I can offer you what levels of authorities we have, but we were not doing anything here. So check this out. This is a very important statement. She continued and said, FDA was not regulating the off-label use of drugs. These statements are not regulations. They have no legal consequences. They don't prohibit doctors from prescribing ivermectin to treat COVID or for any other purposes. This, whenever I reach there, I have now read this and talked about this 3-4 times. It gives me goosebumps that they know that the authority is with the doctors. And doctors mean doctors, NPs, PAs, whoever is authorized in the US to prescribe. So they're not getting back to the court saying we had the authority to regulate, because they don't have it. Paul was talking about it yesterday as well. So instead, they took a position that, well, whatever we said, remember they said it above that it was quippy statements. So now they're saying these statements are not regulations. They have no legal consequences. They don't prohibit doctors from prescribing ivermectin to treat COVID or for any other purpose. It kind of tells me, remember the California law, which is now again in court, where they said that if a doctor speaks with a patient and talks about things outside of the mainstream local authorities or authorities' guidance, then that doctor can be, reported, and the board has a right to investigate the doctor for their license. And the California board actually wanted the ability to look at all the patient records to find patterns of abuse of medications. And the California lawyer, the Congress people, the lawmakers, they said to board, and I have talked about it in the past with references, they said to board that, wait, let us pass this and then we would add on afterwards. This is how much control they wanted. Where did that control come from? Politicians have a dream that somehow we need to stop about ivermectin. No, that came from somewhere, that messaging. So the agency that might be responsible for that, here is that agency's own position about it. We were not regulating any off-label use. These statements are not regulations. They have no legal consequences. They don't prohibit doctors from prescribing ivermectin to treat COVID or for any other purpose. Quite to the contrary. Listen to this. This is FDA saying to the judge. Quite to the contrary, there are 3 instances I'd like to point the court to in the record that show that FDA explicitly recognizes that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. That doesn't mean, so this discussion is not that ivermectin works for COVID or doesn't work for COVID. This is not that discussion. The discussion is, did they stop people? And this is what they said. They said, no, we didn't stop. We can actually show you the examples where we explicitly recognizes that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. This is quite interesting for me to be able to just say, hey, so they went from, in this section, I'm just going to give you a summary and then we stop. They went from, We were just joking. This was informational. We were just joking. Then they went to science. They discussed the science they have. They said, we have a scientific view, so accept our message now. And judges said, no, tell us what was your science. And they said, well, we don't track our science process. And then they simply said, we had the reports of hospitalizations from horse ivermectin. That was their science. Then they moved from there to, do you have authority for the off-label regulation? And they said, no, neither do we have authority. Doctor has the authority, and we recognize that even for the COVID treatment. And not only that, it was not regulation, it was not legal, there was no consequences, and so on. So this is the first installment. I will continue with the remaining parts. I may have to consult Paul here and there for clarification of some of the legalities they speak. But this is what we have. Have a nice weekend. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'm going to turn on the ads in this one and see what happens. I turned on the ads in the last one as well. That is surviving so far. We'll see. And if you would like to support this work, there are links in the description. Best is to get access to Drbeen at a very cheap rate. And then you get access to a bunch of videos as well. And you end up supporting Drbeen and my work as well. So with this, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. I'm just going to quickly look at the comments here. And what I'll do is, I'll do next few. Maybe I'll try to do them all next week and just finish with this one. So thank you very much, and stay safe, happy, healthy, and I would see you next week. I will come back with the next installment. I think there will be a total of 4. Like, subscribe, and share. Supporting links in the description. Getting access to Drbeen in the description. And the video of this appellate court's video hearing, that is also, the link is in the description. Bye for now.